This is Me, I Am Mental, the podcast. A quick disclaimer. The content you find here is neither intended to be therapy or diagnosis. It is provided for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to Me, I'm Mental, the podcast where we discuss all things mental health. Our aim is to provide factual, credible, useful, and engaging content on mental health. My name is Charles Adede.
And my name is Darren Collins. And our guest today is Kamau Wanyoike. And he's going to be talking to us. I'll introduce him formally in a moment. But real quickly, meimental.me is the place to go on the internet to find out more about us and what we do. It's not just a podcast. We also have other events and activities all planned up, and news as well as blogs, information. It's basically the place to go to find out all things Me, I Mental. Of course, the socials are also available. You know where to find those. And if you don't, also meimental.me. Having said that, we don't charge anything for the podcast, so a little bit of business up front is the best way to support us is, of course, like, share, and invite friends to watch the podcast or view it on their favorite platform as well. And that's the currency we're working with right now. So having said that, why don't we just get right into it? Kamau, it's great to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, so yeah. Kamau is, today we're taking a bit of a tangent on the usual.
I'm very thankful for that, by the way. Thanks for getting this guy, because it was getting heavy.
It was.
The last 10 episodes. But, yeah.
So here's what's happening. Have you ever imagined that food, other than just being what sustains you, can also heal you? Actually, come to think of it, it is such an like a truism that we often forget that over the ages, food has been, the source of all our healing. Today, we have on the podcast someone who has a very, very interesting life experience and journey and perspectives to share on what food can do when you eat the right food, for the right purpose. And we will get into a lot more detail in due course. We have with us Kamau Wanyoike. As usual in this podcast, we don't, do the full bio thing by ourselves. We allow the guest, through this conversation to tease out that information. So, Bwana Kamau, where do we start? We start with where were you born? How old are you?
How much do you weigh?
How much do you weigh? How tall are you? Okay. Yes, but a bit of a background just to get the viewers and the audience to know.
And me, I don't know.
Oh,
yeah. Just tell me a little bit about yourself, if you could.
Okay. Thank you. Once again, thanks guys for having me. I guess I was telling him, this is my first real podcast.
Oh, congrats. Well,
yeah,
welcome.
So
I wish the seats were more comfortable.
Yeah. So my name is Kamau Wanyoike, a Kenyan, born in Machakos, in Athi River to be specific. And that's where I was born 62 years ago this Monday. I turned 62.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. And I am married. I have 3 kids, children. Kids belong to the goat. I have 3 children. And I work in the creative industry.
What do you do?
I'm a designer.
Okay.
Have been doing this for donkey years until I found other things that brought us to this conversation. But basically, that's what I am.
Okay.
Just some years back, I was working in media for the longest. I was a creative director at Nation Media Group. And so that's how I earn my living in the creative industry.
Okay.
But then something happened in 1998.
Yes.
I was diagnosed with diabetes. Same age with my daughter same year my daughter was born. Mm-hmm. She's 25 now. And I've been walking that journey for a while now. Then I encountered an episode that made me now change the way I look at health, I look at nutrition, I look at food, and also looking at healing. Yeah. So in a nutshell, that's really.
What was the episode? What was?
In fact,
So-
maybe even before the episode, in terms of the diagnosis. So before that, you were hale and hearty. Some of us have no clue what happens to somebody when they're, what leads to that diagnosis. How are you feeling? What made you feel like you need to?
Yeah. So
What are the typical symptoms for?
I have a very good doctor. One of the symptoms that's very common, you get extremely thirsty. And I came to learning over the years why that happens. But normally, diabetes is a condition where you have elevated glucose in your bloodstream. And when you go for a test, what they do, they check the level of blood glucose at that particular time to determine if or not you're either borderline or completely diabetic. Sometimes it can be caused by something happening in your body, but largely it's because of diet. Also nowadays we see sedentary lifestyle. But one of the other things that exacerbates it is stress. Stress levels will just make you sick in many ways than not. So you start feeling very, very thirsty, lethargic, craving sweet things. So the more you are thirsty, the more you crave sweet things. And I remember in this particular day when I went to see my doctor, a very good doctor, he's a friend of mine, I had just downed a 1 liter bottle of Sprite.
Oh.
And that's just like drinking poison that all the time. Now, needless to say, before this, I was quite healthy. I've always played basketball, and I've always kept going to the gym. I was buff. You'd think I'm healthy, but inward, I was kind of dying.
So you were working out and eating the garbage at the same time? Is that what you're saying? Or was it a different period of your life?
Yeah, just like, over the years, I think to some extent you tend to take your health for granted. Because, I'm playing basketball every Sunday. I jog occasionally. I'm in the gym, I swim. And you're feeling this. But then you go now on the eating side, you're eating all the wrong things.
So simultaneously?
Simultaneously,
okay.
Yeah. And then that was like the tipping point of just taking that Sprite and running to my doctor. And he said, you need to go for a blood sugar test. The way you're feeling, went there, confirmed. My sugar was shooting through the roof. So he prescribed medication to lower it, and we observed it over a 2-week period to see what was happening, if there were going to be any changes. But that never happened.
Before you go there, because we're mostly discussing mental health, and men have a way of not dealing with feelings.
True.
So, like even when you're narrating this, you might just say to us, fact, but at no point are you going to say, I actually felt like this or like that, like that.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering. So during that, how old were you?
I'm very poor at math.
Okay.
98.
No.
I was 37.
Did it feel like a death sentence? Did it feel horrible?
Yes, it was horrible. It was very sinking feeling, like now I'm sick. And, in diabetes, they tell you there's no cure. So it's almost like a slow death sentence. You're just looking forward to dying. And that was very draining. So I went home, sat down with my children, a bit small, younger then, but sat with my wife. And I told her what it is that I was told, what I went through, and it was just like quietness. And then I started the journey now to deal with this thing.
So I have a question for both of you guys.
Okay.
How long does it take you of knowing you should go to the doctor before you actually do go to the doctor? In your life, just as guys, just like something's wrong. We're like,
I think I know what you mean.
what's the length of time?
I think most of the time is like when you're now falling and crawling on the floor. That's
like when you actually fall down. Yeah,
the time we whatever. And I remember we used to be like that time we were playing basketball. We were just healthy young men, and we were like, sickness, not for me. We kind of brush off these things until it hits you now with this kind of reality that actually you're you need to change or you need to do something.
Was there a thing that actually made you think, oh, now I need to go to the doctor?
It's how I was feeling.
Okay. Yeah.
It was like but it wasn't just that day. It had been going on for months or weeks or.
I could feel that thing happening, but that time, my afternoon, every time before I leave the office, after lunch in the afternoon, I'd always have a Sprite. That was my drink of choice at that time, just like 1 liter. It used to be in a bottle. Was it half a liter?
Yeah,
Yes, I believe the half a liter one. And I just gulp it down, glug, 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 glug. So what happened is that now what I felt after I did that, and probably adding to probably what I had eaten for lunch was probably not even as healthy. Could have eaten just some bit of junk food, and that makes it even worse. What I learned, what I know now.
So you get diagnosed then?
I get diagnosed, and we start that 2-week period of observation. Eventually, it wasn't quite changing. There was not much change. And the doctor advised me, just let's accept it. Meanwhile, he referred me to a diabetes specialist, an endocrinologist, who now saw me over a period of time after that reality. Yeah.
So, and then at some point in your life, you decided to take matters into your own hands.
That was now a follow-up episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, what happened?
I
What
remember
precipitated that?
There was a kind of lapse, because then during that period, I was seeing the doctors. I was put on medication, tablets. But then I saw another doctor who advised that because of my age, I think by that time I was in my 40s, because of my age, I was borderline full diabetic. So she advised that I switch to insulin, injectable insulin, which is what I did. And went on with that for many, many years, up until 2017, when another episode happened that made me, just stand up and look things in the mirror and say, no, I need to take control of this. Otherwise I'd die.
Explain episode.
So what happened, I remember I'd gone for a trip in South Africa, came back, and that was March 2017. I had been sick. Even during my trip, I was feeling this body is not together. Needless to say, even during my treatment, I was not quite observant. Sometimes I'd have, just like not really taking good care of myself, and then my sugars would spike and all that. But now as you age, you realize, and with the knowledge that I have now, all the conditions were there for me to be able to end up in that place. What happened is that in 2017, I was this close to a stroke. And that was one of the most scariest things, because I didn't know. All I was feeling is just like closing my eyes, and there were like flashes of lightning going through, and I would hear something like a going like that. And I remember I was at work in Westlands, called the doctor. His clinic is somewhere on Gong Road near Nairobi Baptist. And I told him I'm on my way. I'm not feeling too good. I want to come and see you. That was in the afternoon. Then getting into the traffic, and traffic was so bad this particular day. And I used to live not so far from here, actually, just down the road. And I was using that road, Lenana Road, to come now to be able to get to Kenyatta. And I find myself in traffic, and this is my gate to my house. What am I going to see the doctor for? I just indicated and turned into the house. Went and crashed on the sofa in the sitting room and kind of blacked out. I didn't know I had blacked out, but I kind of blacked out. No. Then I woke up at about past midnight. My family used to know, once you see that guy on the sofa, just leave him there. They'd all gone upstairs to sleep. And I woke up there, drenched in sweat, feeling quite dizzy, unable to even stand. So I kind of slumped to the floor, and I was on my knees. And then I was able to reach for my glucometer, not the glucometer, the blood pressure kit. And I was able to check my blood pressure, which was 226 over some other crazy number on the diastolic. It was horrible. And fortunately I would say by the grace of God, then I was able to sit down, recollect myself, and I realized there was no one to call. Just to go to my phone, and I see so many missed calls from my doctor because he was worried that I didn't, whatever, so he was calling me. And I, cut a long story short, then I went to Dr. Google. And one of the things that I'd heard or seen, I think, in one of the YouTube videos about sometimes drugs or the medication you're taking not working or reacting with other medication. So I wanted to rule that out first. That time, I was being treated for hypothyroidism as a result of the diabetes, and I'll explain later. High blood pressure, and of course now the diabetes. Those three in themselves are what you call metabolic syndrome issues. That means your metabolism has gone off sync, and then that's why you're having all these presentations. And the first thing I did was now to Google. I was being put on medication for all those things. I was taking like 6 or 7 different types of medication and a small bag full of meds. And the thing was occurring to me is like, why am I not getting better? And I'm keep just adding medication. On top of that, injectable insulin.
Wait, you're saying you didn't actually even feel better after this point?
No, even after having taken all those things, including the insulin, I was not getting better. My sugars were out of control.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Were you still feeling other like lethargy and all this?
Absolutely. Because the thyroids, when your thyroids are gone or they're affected, you actually become very lethargic. And that's where and then it's got now the connection that comes with your brain and everything else.
Yeah.
And the body starts almost cancelling this, cancelling that. The whole story was like, it was just a very difficult place to be. So I went now and started looking at the contraindications of the medication that I was taking. One of the drugs which I like mentioning is called glucophage or metformin, which is a baseline drug that all diabetes are put on, is what I was taking. I had moved from 500 milligrams to 850 to 1,000 plus insulin. And I'm not getting better.
Okay.
So I go there and I look at the side effects, and they're horrible. Everything that I was feeling was what this thing was saying.
Okay.
And so actually I remember just grabbing all whatever medication I had and I threw them in the dustbin. I said, I'm going cold turkey. I want to observe my body. And one of the things that I think I can say I have a gift for, if I read something or capture knowledge, I retain knowledge a lot. So I'm able to remember a lot of things. And then I said, I'm a rationally intelligent human being who can read these things and understand. So I started now researching. Okay, the following day I went to see the doctor. And then, of course, we did some interventions. But from then on, the visits were different because I just go there and we discuss. Sometimes we discuss for 1 hour, 2 hours, and I'd leave without a prescription because he's my friend and he's still a lecturer at the university.
May I interject with a question?
Sure. Yeah.
I just wanted to understand. So you mentioned 3 related conditions. There is hypothyroidism. I hope I got that correctly.
Hypothyroidism, yeah.
And then there is hypertension.
Hypertension.
And then there is now diabetes.
The diabetes.
When you were first diagnosed, did you have hypertension as well? Or this was...
No,
this
it
was
presented itself later.
Okay. And am I correct in understanding that this was potentially as a byproduct of the medication? Like a...
Partly, yes.
Partly, yes.
Yes.
Okay, I see.
And I'll explain that.
Okay.
One of the things that anybody with hypertension will tell you, or any doctor will tell you, there's a link. The kidneys work with the heart. Now, if your kidney is compromised, you'll get hypertension. If your heart is compromised, you get kidney issues. because the kidney's job is to filter your blood from toxins and all those things before it exits. Rather, you excrete the waste by peeing. For diabetics, the very first organ that really suffers is your liver. Then subsequently your kidney, because again, those two work together. And again, I mentioned diabetes is metabolism, whatever. So metabolic conditions affect your digestive system, your liver, your kidney, the whole digestive system, and then your reproductive organs and your brain.
Can you just
And your
explain what
cardiovascular. Metabolism is how your body utilizes food to use for fuel. In our case, fuel is glucose. Glucose is the body's go-to fuel. Now, metabolism is when the glucose is not. The metabolism is when the glucose is being utilized by the cells. Yeah, within the cell you have what we call the mitochondria, which is like small engines or generators that help us generate energy, and that's how then you are able to absorb the glucose as a fuel. However, you need an enzyme called insulin. It's actually a hormone called insulin that packages the glucose for it to be metabolized by the cell. So metabolism is when now all that system, because now you have too much insulin, glucose cannot be utilized by the cell without the insulin packaging it, but now the cell is full and the cell is saying, don't give me any more. So you have a lot of glucose coursing through your bloodstream and a lot of insulin at the same time. And that insulin, too much insulin, is actually what causes diabetes. And that doesn't happen immediately. First of all, you're pre-diabetic. And you can be pre-diabetic for even up to 15, 20, 25 years without knowing. Then by the time you get to diabetes, just like the final thing, then you become what we call type 2 diabetes or T2D. So all that, in fact, I'm telling you, that's the metabolism. The way you eat your food, how it's digested, and how the body utilizes it for its own use, how it takes the nutrients, how it separates the nutrients from the toxins, and how it gets rid of all that from your body. So that's what metabolic syndrome is. Now the body goes off balance. You're not able to handle that. Yeah, so
so you were telling us that, so you were narrating how the second episode, that episode in 2017,
yes,
led you to begin a new journey vis-a-vis your health.
Yes.
How you're managing your health. Sort of, you stopped taking your drugs cold turkey.
Yes.
Then what?
I decided to now look at other alternatives. I've always been keen on alternative health from a long time ago, and this goes back to one of my maternal grandfathers, who was an herbalist. He would just go to the bush and forage his herbs, his roots, tree barks, and come and boil those things. And unfortunately, my brother and I, we talk about how we lost all that, because when he went to the grave, nobody took over from where he was.
That's
and that kind of, over the years now, dealing with issues like that, clicked me. I wish my grandfather was here. He would have told me what to do. That mzee died because he was admitted in a hospital when he was too frail to go to the forest. And he got sickly and he ended up in the hospital. Funny thing, he went to the hospital. He just went there to occupy a bed. He totally refused to take any medication they were offering him.
How old was he?
I can't quite remember, because I wasn't there when I was in a different country. I was out of the country by then when he died. But I'm told that he just very stoically refused. He was just saying, let me go. And that's how he went. And he didn't even last like 2 weeks in hospital. I think his time was just
Was your grandmother alive at the time?
Come again?
Your grandmother was alive?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she was alive. Yeah. This is like an auntie to my mother. Yeah. So it was my mother's uncle. So from then on, I had this thing of always looking for alternatives. And that particular time, I was done with allopathic medicine. This thing that they treat this body as a chemical thing, and you just need to feed it with chemicals, and nobody tells you the dynamics of when you take this medication and that medication, what happens, or what you would call probably a loose term, pharmacokinetics. How do they work well together?
Well, so I can get the contrast for myself and for the listeners. Tell us about your moods and your feelings and the thoughts racing through your head up until the point where you had the second episode. I mean, I'm guessing, like for me, like if I'm lethargic for several days at work, I start to get irritable. I start to, I act out in different ways.
Yes.
But also there's a sense of like futility, like life isn't going the way, where's my life going? There's these thoughts that sort of run circles around. Can you describe some of that before we get into the actual health and transformation?
Yeah, the way such an episode, or rather when you're in a condition like diabetes, what it does, sometimes you can get almost calloused in your thinking because you're so used to feeling this way and you just like take it for granted. But one of the things that is present is depression, right? Secondly, you get horrible mood swings. Sometimes you become very, very extremely irritable and ill-tempered. Yeah, that happens.
And you're experiencing them as if they are normal, right?
As if they are normal. And the worst part is that people wouldn't know. The people you're projecting that to wouldn't know what to do with you.
Yeah.
But then we have this thing of saying, his sugars are high, or he has a sugar rush or something like that, or he needs to get some sugar. Because this is the problem with diabetes. Glucose is the main fuel your body uses, and everything you eat by the way turns to glucose. That I'll explain later, including your carbs, your fats, your veggies, your beans, legumes, all of them. Everything turns to glucose eventually in your blood. And then, of course, there are the three sugars we address: glucose and fructose and sucrose. Sucrose, largely the one we buy from the shop to put in our tea, has two sugars in it, glucose and fructose, which then they're in 50-50%. So what happens with glucose, for a diabetic, you don't want it low, neither do you want it very high, because when it's too low, it could actually lead to a coma, diabetic coma, which is so bad. Sometimes it's fatal. And the same thing can happen when it's high, what we call hyperglycemia. It can also happen. So even the medication or treatment that you get is to try and control it to a very whatever level. But now, depends, during your meal times, your sugar spikes depending on what it is that you're eating. And I'll explain what happens, especially when you eat some certain foods. And so what happens then, it really affects your mood. You feel lethargic, so because like in my case, the thyroids were compromised, and they're ones that control that. Either like I would try, because I'd always been athletic. I would try sometimes to go and train, but I just don't have the energy. I don't have the interest, no desire. I just feel like I really need to sleep. And in fact, what would happen then after a meal, you just get into a very, 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 it doesn't matter which meal. It could be breakfast, lunch, or dinner. You become very drowsy and you just want to sleep. That's again an imbalance of the hormones with your thyroids. But then in terms of what it affects you as a person, you become not a likable person.
Yeah.
Because you're presenting these things that guys are like, keep away from this guy. They kind of almost shun you. And then when you realize that, it becomes like, oh, okay, now you don't like me because I'm sick. Okay. Then you start also now closing yourself, getting into your own cocoon. And that's a dangerous place to go, because if you're not strong mentally, it can take you to places you don't to go. So if I answered your question,
specifics help, because I think what does it mean to just be lethargic? It's more than just lethargy, and it manifests itself in different ways.
And so your family must have suffered quite a bit. Did they ever like, or have they ever raised it with you? Maybe you have changed these days.
No,
I
I know, because we worked together with them. First of all, we've made several dietary changes. Fortunately, my firstborn son is a chef by training.
That is fortunate.
And he went because of that, he just into healthy eating. He doesn't even eat.
I've never even considered having children, but now I just have. I never even thought you could have a kid that could actually be a chef. Like that, I never just, That's nice. Is he around?
Yeah, he's around. He's around, yeah. Okay. But he doesn't practice as a chef yet. Or rather, that's not his interest. He's in music. He's in music production, performance, and all that.
Yes.
Yeah,
but they all walked this journey with you. I mean, you like spoke it out loud and said, "Here's what I'm going to do."
That has happened because then within the family we've had now. I was just telling Charles that within the family we've now accepted diabetes is there, but it's not necessarily what you'd call genetic. Genetics play a role in diabetes being in a family, but today most of the reasons we have is just because of, first of all, diet. Wrong diet. Secondly, stress, because if you're predisposed to stress, you'll always then, if you have even a small condition, that not necessarily diabetes, to some extent it will be compromised.
Well, I don't get it. What's the connection between glucose and stress?
Okay. I said glucose is a fuel.
Yes.
Right? But one thing you need to understand that it's not necessarily the glucose that's making you sick because you need glucose in your body. It is actually the insulin that is too much. Excuse me. In a condition we call insulin resistance. I'm sure you've heard such a term.
I've heard the term.
Yeah. So insulin resistance is when you have too much insulin, then the cells resist it.
Okay.
I need to explain again where metabolism falls in the whole global thing of nutrition. First of all, let me correct three things we always call them. There's what we call food science. Then there's what we call nutrition. That is the packaging of nutrients to become food. And then there's what we call metabolism. And sometimes these three terms are confused with one another. And people think all of them talk about the same thing. Food science is actually the growing of your food. Is how you cure the soils, how you nurture your plant, and then they grow into food that is you can harvest and eat.
Okay.
Nutrition or nutrients is when you're now preparing it, how you prepare it, how you cure them, how you store them, and then how you eat them for them to come. Metabolism is how the cell utilizes the food in the form of glucose. Remember I mentioned everything turns to glucose. It's a fuel for the body, among other fuels. I'll explain about fats being the other source of fuel. But you're asking me where does stress come in? Stress comes in when you have there are two organs on top of your kidney. They are called the adrenal glands.
Okay.
Yeah, they are responsible for producing two hormones, adrenaline and cortisol.
Okay.
That have to be balanced at all time. Now, before I go there, I have to talk about what we call the triad of health, the triangle that shows three sides of your health. One of them is chemical.
Okay.
The other one is emotional. The other one is physical, whether you have movement, your motor skills, your ability to turn and do all these things. The chemical one is the chemicals that the body utilizes, sometimes mixed for itself, for its own utility, right? And that can either go this way or that way. When you have a good balanced system, the chemicals that are produced are effective and they are bioavailable, meaning the body can utilize it. And then all your organs, like the key organ, like your stomach lining and the liver, are able to extract all the nutrients from it, including your small and large intestines that are also responsible for getting most of those nutrients.
Okay.
So the body now adjusts its own chemicals based on what it needs. Yeah. And utilize. And we always tell the body is 70% water. That's the correction there. It's not water, it's 70% electrolytes. Meaning there are all these chemicals that the body utilizes for its own functions to create this or to make this happen or to stop this from happening or to bolster your immune system so that you don't get attacks. So what happens then when your body goes out of sync? Okay, the third angle of the triad is the emotional. How do you carry yourself? How do you expose yourself? That has to do with the environment. Exposure to maybe things that are either affecting you or improving your health. Like if you get fresh air, a walk in the open air in the sun elevates your mood and lowers your production of cortisols. So the body has two. Sorry, I'm taking a long.
No, it's great. It's great.
Don't apologize. This is fascinating.
You now need to understand the body is largely a neurological organ. And the thing that actually run everything in your body is your brain and all its functions. One of the things that science is teaching us now, the brain is responsible. Rather, the brain needs some certain it needs to be in a certain level of acuity to be able to function optimally. Because then your body is always sending signals. Your eyes, your retina is responsible actually for, because where it is positioned, your eye is positioned, the retina sees something that causes to send a signal to the hypothalamus to be able to create this particular hormone to attend to this situation. It could be an emergency. So what happens in the body, we've learned there are two, I have learned, scientists have always known, there are two, what we call autonomic systems. Autonomic systems are the nervous system that controls the whole of your body. And there are two systems. One is almost parasympathetic, and the other one is sympathetic. I'm sure you probably have heard those terms. The sympathetic one is the one that handles the fight or flight, right? Parasympathetic one is the one that does things that you have no control over. For instance, if I was to wave at you, that's the sympathetic system because I caused that to whatever. I send signals to the brain. The brain tells the hand, wave at him, wave at Darren. The parasympathetic system controls your digestion, controls your blinking.
Oh, like if I yawn, Charles will yawn.
Yeah.
That's his parasympathetic.
That's a parasympathetic.
Or like when you see tiny holes in your skin crawls. Do you get that one? Yeah, not that one. Yeah, that's a good one.
So in a case of emergency, the sympathetic system does this. There's danger, there's imminent danger. You see a lion and you jump, or you take off, or you whatever. So what it does, the sympathetic system just sends a signal to the brain, shut down everything, grab all the adrenaline you can get in the body and throw it to the legs. Right? And then that action is between the brain and the legs and you take off.
So you're saying that's parasympathetic or sympathetic?
That's sympathetic.
It's choice.
Yeah, you take off. Now, you run off and you hide, get in the house and lock the door, but it takes a while to go down, right?
Right.
So what takes over? The parasympathetic system takes over and helps you to calm down. And all it does, it just lowers the level of cortisol in your system. So the adrenaline goes down and your body is able to go back to its original settings. That's how the body works. Now, stress, just to come back to your answer, stress is when now there was danger and you ran from the danger, but it forgot to switch off that system.
So the cortisol still.
So your cortisol are still, the body is still producing cortisol. And cortisol, when it is elevated, has horrible effects that it does to your body, goes breaking down other things, right? And that being in that state for a very long time, we get into what we call...
What is a very long time?
It's because this is what happens in the body.
No, I mean in terms of minutes or hours, days. What do you mean, long time?
It can be hours. Rather, it can be now. I'm coming now to explain what is called inflammation.
Okay.
Inflammation. Have you ever hammered your finger when you're building something?
Mm-hmm.
All of us have. And there are times when you now hold your finger like this and you probably put some salve or something, but inside the finger it's doing like this. That's inflammation.
Yes.
So imagine the whole body getting into that state. Now, over time, because you're taking the wrong foods, you're taking excess glucose, you're taking UPF, a new term that I've learned, ultra-processed foods.
Mm-hmm.
That is any food that comes in a box or in a container and it has more than 4 lines of explanation.
Yeah.
That's ultra-processed foods. Those things then have a way of now causing the body to stay in that level of elevated cortisol. And much cortisol now means your stress level is always high.
Yeah.
You get now?
Well, you're describing a boda ride through Nairobi every single day. I feel like that's like cortisol, like what injection right into the spine, just like. But all what you're saying is those. So stress would be the thing that needs to be regulated by the body. But if your body's being fed with the processed foods, then you're less and less able to actually regulate the stress.
Absolutely, so because you have elevated levels of both glucose and insulin. So once your insulin is elevated, your body goes into inflammation. And that's why then, by the time you're becoming diabetic, that thing has happened. I said, like, you are pre-diabetic for about 15 years and you didn't know. You get. And you're still eating the wrong food. And unfortunately, the most dangerous part that I've learned now, you go to a doctor and every time you go do your medic, they check your glucose level. They're normal. Are you okay? Normal. My glucose levels are normal. I can go and eat whatever it is I like. And that's what we do. Guilty as charged, because I used to think that my glucose is not high. I'm okay. And unfortunately, then it comes... when it comes to now diabetes, that's at the end of like the whole thing, which becomes a very difficult thing to reverse.
So what accounts for the not elevated glucose, but yet still being pre-diabetic? What are they missing?
They're missing because they don't check for insulin. And insulin is the one that causes diabetes.
I see.
Or rather, elevated insulin. That's what we call insulin resistance. What you want, insulin is a good hormone. Your body needs it. But it needs to be controlled in what we call insulin sensitivity. Once it's whatever, because what's the purpose of insulin, I said? To package the glucose for the cell to be able to consume it or assimilate it. Yeah, so you need that energy. And that's why then you feel lethargic. And what happens is that because your thyroids, just again to give you an idea of how your hormones are set up, the hypothalamus is a factory that makes all the hormones for your body through the pituitary gland somewhere inside here. And the only way they can get to the rest of your body is through your thyroid. So what the hypothalamus does, it creates an enzyme and a hormone called thyroxine. Thyroxine is one that now gets into the thyroid glands, and the thyroid glands is able now to split it into T3 and T4. That's the thyroid hormones, that T3 and T4. T3 is the active one. So when T3 is elevated, it's a good thing because you have energy, you can do this, you feel like you really want to go for a jog and swim, you're doing well. However, when it's elevated, you get into hyper. That's when people who have hyperthyroidism, they're always sweating, they become very sick, whatever. And then it becomes what we call Hashimoto's. No, that's Graves' disease. That's when it's hyper. Hashimoto's is when it's lower. I have to correct myself. I know I may have mixed my two of those, but those two happen with your thyroids because the T4 is a dormant whatever. And then normally when it's elevated, because the thyroid is not functioning properly, that's when you get all these things, the lethargy, and all those things, but they affect then also your cardiovascular system. Hence now, because again, metabolism is cardiovascular, it's your heart, your blood work through the kidney, your liver, and insulin resistance is largely when people they have a pot. That's somebody who has insulin issues. It's called fatty liver disease. And in the past, it used to be alcoholics used to have it. Nowadays, we have what we call non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
In fact, I read that in Mexico, they're finding children as young as like 9 or 10 having it.
Even in the US,
Really?
it's happening.
Yeah, I'm sure now.
Because of, and again, the lower income community can't access real food. Yeah, which we'll talk about. I don't think Americans eat real food anymore. They just eat a lot of highly, highly processed stuff that cannot even be called food. So back to your stress levels and what have you. Then you have other presentations like anxiety, which to me, they're all diet related because it's something I told you about the triad of health. If you don't have your emotional, your chemical, and your mechanical and physical in balance, your body goes out of sync. It goes off balance. It goes off equilibrium. Something we call the name just disappeared off the top of me.
I have an interjection, random interjection. But when we live in a city, like what Darren was
I've just remembered, they're called homeostasis.
Homeostasis,
yes, that's where the body, I'm sure you've heard that term. The body has to be in equilibrium.
I know I've heard all the terms. I can't define them or put them together in a cogent sentence.
It was a
off my head. Yes.
Darren talked about living in Nairobi, and earlier today I saw this someone who I find she's very an activist, Wandia Njoya, who is, if you know Reverend Timothy Njoya's daughter. So sometimes I look at her tweets, and today she had posted an article by another gentleman. Unfortunately, I can't remember his name, but this gentleman was describing Nairobi. And basically the description of Nairobi is like a war zone.
I call it the wild, wild west if it was run by middle management.
And a couple of his friends have actually left Nairobi for other quote unquote saner places. Yes. I think one of them went to Kakamega, another one has gone to Mombasa or something like that. But the thing I find about Nairobi is that if Darren was talking about, if you just a commute from here to Nairobi West, the 30 or so minutes you take to Nairobi West, it will take you 3 hours for your body to just come, if ever. It even
come to homeostasis.
So I think we are in constant stress.
Yeah.
And because of also just the pressures of life, very few of us are able to take the time it takes to decompress before you move on to the next thing. So you do the commute, you get there, you have to deal with a client who's probably angry about 50 things. You pick up that stress, you're maybe dashing back to your office.
Sure.
That is, the commute, I think you get the picture.
Yes.
So the thing that then happens is that it becomes almost, we are constantly living in fight or flight. We are living in that space. So
Absolutely.
our bodies are bearing the brunt
Absolutely.
of, the
And I don't even know if it can be overstated. Like, I wonder how much the commute actually, for everyone, because if you're driving your own car, there's a massive amount of you're making decisions and they're stressful. If you're on a peaky, you're almost dead all the time.
I know.
There's that.
It's not even
It's
funny.
not even a joke.
Yes.
And then if you're on a matatu, you're like at the mercy of it all. Just in the loud, and then am I going to get ripped off? And is it actually going to take the route that I want it to take? Is it even possible for me to board this one that's not crazy and still get there in time for my boss not to yell at me? Like that, there's not really. I guess you could walk,
Yeah.
but even then is really tricky.
You're going to get mugged or something,
right?
So that's
ruin your
also
shoes,
Yeah.
And I don't know if it can be overstated.
So what I find about that balance you're talking about, therefore, is like we almost have to. A few of us may have the luxury of accessing a gym or something where you can, work out a bit of it. Yeah. But I think some of the stress is not the sort of stress that a workout will resolve. Yeah. Like I also notice, even for me, sometimes I could exercise a bit, but there's still a tension which I think needs maybe a different way of processing. Yeah. Like you say, maybe what I probably need is spending quiet time in some green space.
Absolutely.
Now it means that our lives are already out of work almost permanently.
Yeah.
Then to add on to it, we have the situation where for now we're beginning to eat junk food constantly. Okay, so in terms of what we eat and even how we eat it, because the times when these days at least, I have the presence of mind to have breakfast and sort of eat, because I work sometimes from home and things are a little more, But when I used to go to the office consistently, half the time I would only discover maybe at 3 or 4 in the afternoon that I'm living on a cup of coffee. Mm-hmm. That's the only thing I've had from morning. Mm-hmm. And by that time, I'm grumpy. I want to kill everyone. I don't even know what's going on. And then it just hits me, hey, you haven't had a meal. Yeah. Then you grab whatever is available at that time, probably
the
junk.
Office biscuits.
Yeah, isn't it? By the time you get home, you probably you're sort of full, so you won't eat.
You don't feel.
So then repeat the following day. So I think that's the sort of life we're living, and therefore I don't know. I know there is need for us to. It's very urgent for us to pay attention. It's killing us. Yeah. But it is quite dire, isn't it?
I will. Everything we've said, it's like, and I talked about the triad of health. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that, in terms of living well, even it's part of the environment we are in, that contributes a lot to our stress. Not just getting to work, but even when you're at work, what happens there? And I remember working in media for the many years I was there. It was horrible. Though I had another episode happening with me regarding my health while I was working in Kampala, and that's the time I had made a point that I'm done with this, and I just came and resigned. Okay, it was that bad because the stress levels in the media industry are horrendous, especially where you have to deal with deadlines, especially if you're working in a news organization. Yes. And you have to take this material to press at a certain time. You always live with a knot in your stomach. You know that feeling?
It's probably compounded if there's any sort of career advancement on your mind as well.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying, that then you find an environment that exacerbates your condition. Mm. Yeah, because it's stressful. The lights are on and nobody's switching them off in your body. Right. And you're trying to sleep.
That's
so what happens is that we now need to mitigate. And for me, I had now to take a very conscious decision to learn how to cope with stressful situations, to cope with anxiety. One of the things that I thank God for, I have faith, and in my faith in God, I just know how to sit down and relax and pray and read my Bible, and I'm able now to decompress. But you have to take a conscious effort to do that. You have to know that I need to get out of fortunately in my office where I work, there's a beautiful walk to go to Westgate with a nice walk with a small park. I normally go and sit there in the sun for about 15, 20 minutes for a reason. And I leave my phone in the office, and they know that I need to do that. Sometimes I stay even 30 minutes seated on the grass. One thing that I need to do a concept called earthing, where your body has to touch the ground. I'm sure you've heard of that. That is one of the great stress relievers. The other beautiful, wonderful, free exercise you can do is just gently walk. Walking is one of the
Gently
best.
is key.
Yeah. Because I'll tell you now, you go to the gym and you work out. Most of the exercise you do in the gym elevate cortisol. The more you work out, so their stress is not being addressed unless then you are going to do a massage thereafter, which helps 100% tremendously. But then walking helps because the pressure on the soles of your feet is directly connected to your brain, and it has a way of decompressing. And that's when you listen to your meditational stuff or your podcast, something that is mellow, or some nice Michael Hope music, my favorite. Yeah. Michael Hope does musical scores. It's more, and he's big on, I love the cello.
Okay.
Yeah, one of my nephews plays the cello, and I love that instrument. Just like, even when I want to work,
Did you see Yo-Yo Ma come in last month? Yo-Yo Ma. Well, he's the cellist, right?
No, I didn't know. Was it
Yo-Yo
concert?
Ma. He's like the best cellist in the world.
I don't know.
He was at National Theatre.
Okay. I didn't know
So
about that.
you missed a chance.
No, I missed that. I've been out of whatever. I've been out of my social circulation for a while.
Just to add a little on that, you know, so one of the other things I do, and in terms of relaxation, is I just meditate. I just try to do an hour's worth of meditation a day. And
an hour?
Yes.
Charles, you do an hour a day.
I think it takes it's incredible. It takes incredible discipline to even be able to build the capacity to do an hour a day. That's I built that over time because I started in 2015 and it's been like that.
Okay.
But the reason they say that if it is possible to do at least an hour is that sometimes when you do 30 minutes, and if you're observing, because what you're observing is also like the chatter in your brain is like in about 30 minutes, the chatter is still going on. So it's after about 30 or so minutes that the brain begins to calm down. That's why you need to, you know, prolong it a bit if you can, but it's something you need to grow into.
Wow.
So that for me works quite a bit.
What time of day do you do it?
Typically 9 to 10, between 9 and 10 in the evenings, or sometimes in the mornings when I wake up. In which case, sometimes I do 2 hours. Like if I have a bit of time in the morning, I'll
do you leave your house unlocked while you're doing this? We get robbed, Charles. The crew and I were just talking.
Yeah. So that does help quite a bit, and I would encourage, in terms of mindfulness and mindful meditation practices, or like if you can't even do those things, like you're saying, quiet walk in a green space, over and above just the exercising can help like balance things in our lives.
Yeah, Kamau, do you have any other physical routines besides that, or do you do meditation as well?
Yes, I do. Okay. I normally, I tell you, I pray and I read my Bible.
Okay.
And it depends on the time that I'm choosing. There are times when I have a bit more time, then I'll do it for longer. But I'll probably wake up at 4:30, go into that time of just reading the word and just being able to bring myself to that level. Although for me right now, let me say that over time, because as Charles says, your body is able to adapt, and the body is one of the best organs in learning routines and learning situations, depending on what you're presenting to it. So it's what we call adaptation. So the brain is actually very well adaptable to learn some things, and that's why you always learn. And once you make that a habit and you have the discipline, it actually takes it like a norm. It becomes your new normal.
In your estimation, how long does it take for it to go from something you're trying to start, something you're doing regularly, to a normal?
It doesn't. I can't really answer that for sure to say that it takes long or takes that time, because it depends on what it is that you're trying to do. Once something becomes habit, and habits are learned, it becomes second nature to you to always go to that place, and then your body always know, oh, I'm stressed, I need to go to my happy place, and that's how now that becomes a normal. That's why I say the not just your brain, the body has the ability to adapt to your situation. It's even physically sometimes. That's why people who have injuries, say you had a car accident, then you hurt your leg and your leg grew a little shorter, your body will find how to adapt to compensate for that loss. And mostly you find maybe then your spinal cord will get some slight scoliosis because of that. Because it's compensating, because it's adapting, and it's a very intelligent organ or thing or being, or rather, may say the man or even animals are able to do that. But coming back, sorry.
Just I know we are digressing a bit, but you've also spoken about spirituality and the role of spirituality, and I think it would be remiss of us to not just, now that it's come up, let's just flesh it up a bit. One of the things I think that can be very, very helpful is that particularly with spirituality, however you want to go about it, is that if you spirituality helps us with developing a sense of values, things that give you a compass and a meaning and ground you, and fallback positions when things are not making sense. You know that, okay, this might not be clear for me now, but there's probably a reason for it. Absent some form of spirituality, you might find that life can become very harsh and meaningless. And therefore, again, to the extent that it's possible, I always think that find something that you relate to in terms of cultivating that spiritual side of you. Ask yourself the big questions of life. Take time to reflect and meditate on such things, because that way, sometimes that's the only thing you're left with when everything seems to be burning to the ground.
True. Yeah. And I talked about the triad of health that gives you homeostasis. And we talked about the emotional side of things, which is emotional stroke spiritual. That cannot be gainsaid. It's so, so, so important that your body is you're able to go through that. Because what is the opposite of good mental health, is bad mental health, is when you have one of the key things that we don't know, it has a medical reality, a simple concept like unforgiveness. Unforgiveness has nothing to do with food you're eating, whatever. It's just like harboring very bad stuff in your head about somebody else, right? Yes, they hurt you, but you still carry this burden in you. And that thing can ruin you. There's a way then it works on your chemical system and start now shutting off some things there. It works now on your physical, because I don't even feel like walking today. Because again, all these things work in tandem. It's a system. So if this, we call it clockwork. If you open a watch, it has all these moving parts. Just remove one of them.
Yeah, thing falls apart.
Or if one of them is faulty, the whole machine stops down. And that's how the body is. And we always forget that there's that part of us that needs to be taken care of. And I'm sure we don't give enough emphasis on the emotional, the spiritual, to be able to be in a place. Like for me, one of the things that I learned, because I used to be a warrior. Oh gosh. Not warrior spear carrying thing. The one who worries about everything. Oh God, oh God, where am I going to get my money? Oh God, those things. And they start working on you, and then you're doing all the manner of things, and nothing seems to be working. Until I learned, in fact, I remember this Lavington Valley Arcade shop. There's a small tuck shop there that sells some really nice sayings on plaques and walls. And I read one that said, if all else doesn't work, go to sleep.
It's not terrible advice.
I seem to own that thing. I treasure my sleep. It's like,
well, wait a minute. If you get up at 4 a.m, what time are you going to bed?
Maybe around 9 or 10, thereabouts. So what happens then? I'll tell you how because of my eating habits, then my body is able to kind of know when it's going down. I don't practice that very much because sometimes I find myself still awake and probably watching TV. But I'll always know when my body gets to a point where it's tired. And now because of the way I can't call it optimize my diet, I know what to eat if I want to really get a good rest or the things to do. I used to practice something called intermittent fasting. And that's just like I stop eating, say, 8 o'clock. Sometimes when I'm late, I'll eat till 8:30. But I'll make sure I don't touch food the following day until about 11 or noon. So I have a whole 16, 18 hours of fasting.
Yeah.
That's what intermittent fasting is. And it's super, super, super helpful. One of the biggest benefits of intermittent fasting, and I think we're digressing now I'm getting into the meat of what is that I talk about, is it helps your body go into a state we call autophagy. I don't know if you're familiar with that term.
I know the term.
No, sorry. Okay,
I've heard of it.
Right.
Yes. Autophagy is when your body utilizes your cells all the time, right? And they die off and it replenishes them. But your body will not replenish your cells. You won't get new cells if you're still awake. They're actually diminishing, but you're not replenishing. If you're stressed. And that's why it's bad to watch even action movies before you go to bed. Don't do that. If you want to watch something nice before you go to bed, something I practice all the time, I watch comedies. Why? Because I need a release of dopamine. Comedies, laughter is the best medicine. Whoever said that actually didn't know there's actually a link to the physical.
Darren is a comedian.
The laughter, when you do that, it helps the body release serotonin, which is important now for the release of the other feel-good chemicals, your endorphins, your dopamine, and all those things. And serotonin is not found mostly in food. It's actually manufactured by your brain. But there's some certain foods they tell you to find, but you won't get it the way the brain makes it. So during your autophagy, if you get now into intermittent fast, you go into a very deep sleep. Your body goes into a function of autophagy and it replenishes your cells, taking rid of the used up ones, generating new ones in millions overnight, almost billions, if I may say so. I'm not a type scientist. The thing is, like now with autophagy, your body works at its optimally best. And you wake up fully refreshed in the morning. You wake up quite hungry, but not to eat food. And just let me tell you one thing, guys. Human beings were not meant to eat food in the morning. That's not our historic makeup. In fact, our forefathers fasted, not even fasted, they starved. They only ate food. Our ancestors, they only ate food when they found it. And they ate it to their fill until the next hunt or the next harvest or the next find when they go foraging, And unfortunately, over the years, we've now learned to time our meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Your body does not digest foods very well in the morning, just so you know. And that's why then when you come from autophagy, the best thing you need to be putting in probably is some liquid. A cup of tea would be good. Then eat your solid stuff after. Maybe after 10. This is the concept of fasting. The longer you fast, the more benefits you get. And I'm telling you about now because autophagy then happens when you're sleeping. It's the same concept that works when you're sick. That's why your body loses appetite when you're sick. Hello. It's telling you, please slow down. We want to heal. And it goes into now some form of autophagy to start your immune system starts working to fight off this thing. And it releases white blood cells to go and attack the area where you're sick. And that's why we always say, and the person who's sick, just give them soup or water. Just give them fluids. Don't give them hard food. the body is telling you, slow down, I want to heal. And actually, when people who stay without food, because unfortunately you go to even the hospital, you're admitted, oh, you have to eat because you're on this mission, you have to eat. We're interfering with the body's system of how it responds to that. Our forefathers never used to eat that much. And they were lean and they were strong and everything until we brought food as things that it's a physical thing you must do every day.
So I want, because I think we're entering now into the the real point to this discussion.
Yeah.
But I want to take you back a bit so that we are sequential,
Right.
so to speak. So you get to this point where you decide you're going to take life in your own hands, and then because it's actually now just up to you, really.
Yep.
At what point how did you get to identify food as the key to your well-being?
Yeah.
And then did you go all the way, to the point, and you pointed out a little earlier that one of the things you did is there are times when you would now just meet the doc to talk,
Yes.
but he was no longer really the guy giving you prescriptions. So at
Yes.
that point, you were completely off meds?
I was still on meds.
You were still
I was still on some of the meds for some certain condition here and there that I needed to lower. I didn't. What I did cold turkey was the whatever medication, but I remained on insulin for a while.
Okay.
Because I needed also to maintain good control of my sugars. But now, what I did to compensate on that is the stuff that I was reading now. I talked about my grandfather and what have you. Now to read, thankfully, internet brought all these things, good and bad, because internet is full of valuable information, but it's also full of horrible information in equal measure. So I think
You're generous to call it equal measure.
yeah, or probably even worse. So for me then, the ability now to be able to know what it is, can I try? And that's when I went into a period of trial and error. And I mentioned that I didn't start on this because I started my research, let me call it that, my research way back in 2015, before the 2017 episode. So the 2017 episode was kind of like, okay, Kamau, this is serious. We might as well now get into the alternatives. And so I started reading about Ayurvedic medicine, the Chinese herbs that they use, herbs that have been used locally, things that you find in plentiful. And the place I started actually was the kitchen shelf. I went and found turmeric, I found ginger, I found garlic, cinnamon, cloves, cardamom, all those things, black pepper. Oh my goodness. Those are my go-to things, And then I started now studying and then now listening to people who talk about them. One of the things that you find in internet, you find this guy who just wants to push his content so that he can get views. And they'll take this and they tell you 10 ways to do da with turmeric. And you go there and you just listen, this is what. At first I was trying some of these things and even some doctors I was following, then I stopped because when I came to learn they're not real doctors per se, or whatever it is they're doing, they're just doing to grow their
income,
numbers.
the revenue stream, yeah.
Yeah. So I started, one of the things that I took, I went to a website that teaches you how to understand, it breaks down how to understand medical terms. Then when I can take a medical journal and read this, I can read a scientific, whatever, to know what is called a baseline study or a survey, to know the difference. A baseline study is what we call research by reckoning. I come and meet Darren. What did you eat for dinner last week? How can you remember such a thing? Then we come and form findings and call them. That's not scientific at all. A scientific one is the one that is empirical, and then there are peer reviews. Guys are going to do the same thing and probably get to the same answers or differing answers. So I came to learn all that stuff. I came to learn medical terms to be able to understand what was happening in my body. One of the inspiration was a guy called Alan Cover, I believe. He used to work for Intel, one of the founders of Intel. If I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. But one of the things that when he was diagnosed with cancer, he went to the doctors and told him, boss, you have 6 months to live. There's no cure for this. You just six months to live. And being a scientist he went now into research. He started researching on a possible treatment protocol he could utilize for his ailment. Mm-hmm. And I think he did it, and he went back to the doctors and told them, I've come up with these protocols. Let's follow this. And to some extent, it worked. I don't know what happened thereafter, because I think he also died later on. Mm-hmm. But the thing was, I was like, wait a minute. You mean you actually can create your own treatment? You can actually come up with your own protocol to take a condition. So I have a rational mind. I know how to read stuff and understand. That's exactly what I choose. One of the benefits I really, really benefited from, I must say, the Indian Ayurvedic medicine, which is really the natural path. That's what they call it. In fact, one of my favorite sayings, they say, if diet is right, then medicine is they say if diet is wrong, medicine is of no help. Mm. If diet is right, medicine is of no need. And that's when that brought me to the area of looking at what it is that am I ingesting. Then, but start understanding how my body works. Because now the doctors had explained all they knew, why I'm getting this, why this thing is related to my heart, why my kidney is related to my heart is because XYZ is not happening. I have elevated this, but we are going to give you these prescriptions. And I tell my doctor, I tell him, Daktari, that's what I call him, write my prescription, but write it in English. Not that jargon thing you write and you give it to the pharmacist. That way then I'm able. And what I do, I'd just go now to Google. Yeah. And he knew that I'd go and Google about that medication. One of the things that I learned, even when I buy medication, when I used to buy medication, it insists it has the pamphlet. And I would read. Okay, they intentionally put the small print because they've done it in like 3 or 4 languages, Arabic, English, French, But I invested in a magnifying glass intentionally. Now it's in my supplements bag. So I always because I want to read. When you have a medication, we are recording this. I won't mention brand names, although I did mention metformin or glucophage is one of the metformins. Metformin is a common name. Mm. There's a drug I was taking for hypertension. I won't name the name. And I looked at the pamphlet and it has what we call indications. Indications are what that drug will do for you, the benefits. Contraindications are the possible side effects. So this particular drug, the indication had 3 paragraphs. The contraindications had 8 paragraphs.
Fun.
Just like, okay, do I want to take this thing and expose myself to this? And then by that time, then I'd reached a point. I tell you about. I went into Ayurveda. Ayurveda follows something that is being practiced now in Kenya by the good doctors. Let me call them the good doctors. It's called functional medicine, and people like chiropractors are part of that. Whatever. And then what they do, they say you have to look at the whole body, right? Sorry, I forgot to mention one of the conditions that I got from the most damaging one from the diabetes was peripheral neuropathy, a very painful condition that I'm still dealing with my legs from the calves going down all the way to my toes and the extremities of your whatever. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It starts like pins and needles.
Tingles, yeah.
Tingling, then it gets into burning, then it gets into horrible, horrible pain. Then at one time I was exposed to shingles. Shingles is basically chicken pox when it grows up. Chicken pox. Yeah. It's adult chicken. That's the word I was looking for. Adult chicken pox.
I know terms, Charles.
Clearly.
Yeah. Clearly. And normally happens when you got chicken pox as a child. Those viruses never left you.
It stays.
They're dormant. So one time later years when your immunity is very, very low, they attack.
Are they going to be?
It's also not stress related too. Like the immunity goes low, stress goes high.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now all those conditions, stress included, all of them will be conditioned if you're, because what inflammation does, it weakens your immune system totally. Mm-hmm. And all what we call autonomic diseases, you have the diabetes, things like Alzheimer's, dementia. They are part of, what's the other one? I'm forgetting, but they are quite a number, including heart disease. They are all part of that makeup of autonomic conditions that happen to you when your body is off equilibrium. So coming back to what we're talking about, the stress levels, your mental health, all of them are related to this thing that we and that's why I always thank you for inviting me. I always said we've always focused on the wrong side. We bark at the wrong tree when it comes to mental health. So say, these guys probably look at his past, his conditions. Those environments, yes, contribute to this. One large area we always forget to focus on is nutrition.
It's an amazing thing, and I could see how so much of you say diabetes can be genetic, can be family. That's a portion of it. My dad recently passed away, but before he did, we had talked about my grandfather, who apparently was a horrible attitude, horrible guy. Just not a good, wasn't kind to the family. Turns out, we found out some years ago that we have a genetic disposition to an allergy to wheat, to gluten, and as my brother and I were aging, he's 16 years older than I, we would talk about like this terrible feeling we had in our guts all the time. And we were really short-tempered. Like we're so quick to anger. So once he figured it out, he told me, and so I stopped taking gluten. But then I found out that a whole bunch of my family, half of my family, had celiac disease, were gluten intolerant. And we all went, if this is what Granddad was going through, there's no question why he was horrible.
Yes.
Because by the time he died, he was only eating. I've heard about men who eventually just live off porridge or something, just one dish, because it's the one thing that doesn't cause inflammation and pain inside of them. And meanwhile, that's not high quality of life, eating, that. But to think that so much of your mental health can just come from discomfort that has been redefined as normal, but still has the symptoms personality-wise of someone who's totally stressed out, not on the equilibrium, definitely short-tempered, and who knows how depressed? Because no one likes to be that way.
True.
But how would you even recognize depression if it's so long-lasting that it's been redefined as normal?
It's almost like considered your personality now.
Charles just being Charles.
That guy suffers depression. I always hear that, and I'm looking. There's a family friend back in upcountry, a friend to my mother. Her son has horrible depression, and one of the things I go talk to them, I'm like, "Have you ever considered what kind of food you're feeding him?" And it's interesting you mentioned wheat. Wheat is the number one contributor to nearly all allergies. Wheat.
It's right up there. Yeah, top 5 for sure.
And it's not wheat. This is a kind of wheat we eat today, unfortunately. Most of it is GMO, especially if you come from the US, and wheat for you is a staple. You eat like every day. Wheat is in everything. There's a lot of GMO because the problem with GMO, that wheat grain has been fortified with glyphosate, an insecticide, which Monsanto in their wisdom thought put it in the grain, put it in the seed, as opposed to spraying, because they used to spray and they'd mess people up, and then put it in the seed, as this is a brilliant thing to do, which is why now there's a pushback on GMOs. But they found out, because glyphosate never leaves that grain. Once you ingest it, it goes into your system. If animals, not just eating the wheat, if they feed on the straw, like cows or pigs, they find glyphosate in their meat and in their milk. That is found in babies when they ingest that milk. Glyphosate is everywhere. So amongst one of the most notorious foods, wheat is one of them. Was wheat that way? No. When you read the Bible, that's what they ate. And people in the Mediterranean, the paleo diet, they eat wheat. Fortunately for them, they eat mostly durum wheat amongst one of the most, what we call the original germplasm. It's not been modified in any way.
Who's doing this? Who?
The Mediterranean, people around the Mediterranean
okay.
region, the paleo diet.
So I had an incident about 4 months ago. There's a woman here in town who creates gluten-free flours and sells them at various places, including the supermarkets. I called her because I wanted to see about her advertising for another network, and she said, "Oh, and by the way, when suppliers purchase this, I'll go train a chef how to do it differently than the other flours if they're going to have a gluten-free flour." So I hooked them up with guys at Anselm's Hot Glass. He's got a little cafe out there, and I said, "It'd be great. You guys have a separate oven. You guys can make a gluten-free pizza. I'd buy it from you all the time." Very first day I went, I ordered it, and it came out. And someone I was with got a pizza that was not gluten-free. And when the server came out, she didn't know which one was which. But she didn't say so. She just put one in front of me and one in front of the other person. And then I just looked at it and I was like, I feel like I've had 1,000 gluten-free pizzas. I know kind of what it looks like, but how do you tell it's cooked? I go, are you sure? She goes, I don't know. Or she said, yeah, I'm sure. And then the owner came out and I was like, hey, Anselm, did you see which one it went in? He goes, oh, I don't think that's the right. Anyway, there's a bunch of confusion. Turns out I'd already eaten a piece and it was the wrong one. And I had no symptoms.
Right.
And I was like, this is weird. I've been diligent about being gluten-free. I know what happens when I accidentally get it. I just had a whole slice. So he apologized, said, I'm so sorry. But still, I'm still having no symptoms. So the next day, the owner, Anselm, called me up and said, hey, are you feeling okay? Because I know you got the wrong, whatever. And I said, yeah, well, oddly enough, I am feeling okay. And this is so confounding and so confusing and so frustrating because I'm so diligent. Why would I be okay if I had this other pizza? Have I been wrong? I don't know. And he said, I don't know. And I said, our gluten pizza, our regular pizza crust, we actually import it from the Mediterranean. And I was like, what? I've heard about this. And that's apparently what it came in from Italy.
So the Mediterranean countries, we go to Morocco, Algeria, all the way to Egypt and the Middle East, and especially now across the pond to Greece, Italy, Spain, all those guys, they eat like the island in Sardinia with the most octogenarians.
Right.
Yeah, actually is a beautiful YouTube video of actually what I like. The part
Charles,
I like,
octogenarian means 80 years old or older.
There's a 93-year-old woman who's dancing with her father, who's 100 and something.
And a bit.
And they're still alive.
Nice.
The secret about that island is that no food comes from outside. They grow all their food. They grow their wheat. They keep their own sheep and goats for milk and making feta cheese. They make their own wine. They have their own vineyards. And then they live such a stress-free life. They just eat and dance and make merry. And everybody is like a brother to everybody because they're living long. They are so content. They have like the complete homeostasis, if you ask me. So yes, wheat has that bad whatever to it. Because today, I was reading, there's another doctor, I like reading his work. He was saying there are about almost 20 to 30,000 different types of wheats that they've created. 20 to 30, they say there's so many because there's so many labs that work on different seeds and whatever it is. So you already know what it is you're eating. Again, that's a story, and there's a guy who's done, I think, a movie on it on Netflix. How our food was just messed up. Food is no longer what our forefathers would look at that and will not eat. And we're eating all the wrong stuff. We're eating Blue Band. Sorry, again, I mentioned margarine. Let me call it margarine. Margarine is one of the worst fats you can take.
What's that history? The history of Blue Band, margarine. Again.
So the margarine, what happened is like in the past, the 18s up to the 1900s, people were eating animal fats.
Yeah.
They were eating lots of butter, ghee. They were eating animal fats, lard, tallow, fat made from geese, all that was their food. And they would harvest cotton. They would harvest the cotton for the fabric, for the cotton instead of making these things. But then there's a seed, which is a leftover. They would now squeeze it and you get this kind of sludgy stuff that they would use as lubrication for industrial lubrication. Until a German scientist in the 50s or mid-50s, early 60s, discovered a way of kind of turning it into a kind of oil using a certain technology, a scientific technology. You turn it into oil. All they did was to invert what would be industrial oil into calling it cooking oil. And the number one cooking oil that they made from that was Crisco. It forms part of my other presentation. I mean, Crisco is popular in the US. It's like the Akimbo there. And that's how Crisco was born. And then because of the US, you have the most fantastic advertising machinery. They turned all focus to that and they invalidated the animal fats. They gave it a bad rap, saying that these things are the ones that cause cholesterol, the elevated cholesterol. You go and look at, in fact, one of the books by Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers. He talks about a community that came from Italy and went to the US, and they were eating all the animal fats, no whatever of cholesterol. Cholesterol, by the way, is another story. We talk another day because it's a very long topic. But now they managed to just pick that and tell you need to be eating this. And that's also when the movement in the 60s has started to push us into eating grains. Remember in biology, we were taught essential fats, essential amino acids. There are no essential carbs. They've never been essential carbs because human beings don't digest carbs very well. And I told you about our forefathers. Yet they would eat carbs, but they would eat it in that season. And then they would eat, in fact, those days I was saying probably there were 2 or 3 different germplasms that were popularly made into grain.
What was the word you said? What
germplasm. That is the root of the seed.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I read that somewhere.
Okay.
That's what we call it. I remember from biology.
Okay.
But or what you'd call heirloom, an heirloom seed. That's the origin. It goes back to the origin. If you remember in South America, the Incas and the maize. There's a certain maize they still retain up to this day that has not been modified. We've had what we call hybrid because it gives you a long cob. All those are the things that come, that how food has really changed, introducing so many other things. So what happens is that you find, because we are not eating well the way our forefathers ate, and because we're eating too many meals, one of the biggest epidemics in the West is overeating.
Obesity.
Yeah. Obesity that comes from overeating, just eating the wrong things at the wrong time and eating lots of it, And I'll tell you what happens to carbs, now coming to what it is, how I was telling you how the graph works for glucose in our body. Because the source of glucose, everything that you're eating, it is more elevated in carbs. That's where you get lots of glucose and everything, because those are starches. So this glucose has 3 formulation. You have sugar in and of itself, which is glucose, and fructose, 50-50, right? Then you go now to the starch. That is your grains, wheat, rice, all of them. They compound into carbohydrates, which eventually turn to glucose after digestion, including legumes, things like beans. In fact, when you cook your beans, if you press it, it's white inside.
Yes.
After 2 hours of digestion, it turns into glucose. So everything turns to glucose, even meat. And the redder the meat, the more glucose you get, as opposed to a fat meat, which is my go-to preference, because I'm going for the fat, and I'll tell you why. So what happens when you eat carbs in the morning, you get a sugar spike. And I told you, like for diabetics, sugar is supposed to be normal, like that. That normal, you don't want it to shoot, because again, you're going into hyperglycemic areas. Now what happens, this is a sugar spike, this is the time it takes to digest that food or to utilize that when it's converts to glucose, right? The fuel that the body needs. So you've eaten tea, bread, or mandazi, chapati with tea, and you put three teaspoons of sugar here.
Yes.
So you've actually elevated your sugar so high. So your carbs and your sugar go up to here, a dangerous level. But fortunately, that is lasts 30 to 45 minutes. It goes down. You feel hungry again. You go back. Like if you eat something like pizza, it won't sustain you after a short while because all that is utilized. It is good if you're active. If you're a guy who's going to take a djembe, go to the shamba or do some manual work, the guy who's a laborer. But if you're going to just sit in front of your screen and
there's
work,
a big difference.
whatever. But after 30, 45 minutes, you're hungry again.
Yeah.
So it's 10 o'clock tea, as we call it, China mandazi. You bring that mandazi and eat that. Again, you get a sugar spike.
Yes.
Now, if you're not diabetic, if you can handle that, then you're okay. But you still have the same spikes. Now, over time, what's rising because you're going to the doctors, you have conditions, they say, let's check your glucose levels. They find their glucose, hey, you're normal, you're okay, you go home, you'll be fine. Just do some exercise, What they're not checking is something called insulin and how it rises. Because now when the carbs go like that, the next food source of your glucose is proteins and fruit and amino acid and all those things. So that has a kind of a curved slope that goes like this. And it tapers off over 1 to 1.5 hours. That's how protein is utilized, right? So your body gets all the benefits from it because it's what you call a sustained release, starting from your digestion in the mouth all the way to your stomach. Now, the third, and then I told you proteins falls where? Essential amino acids, essential. The body needs it. Yeah, the body depends on it. Then the third one is essential fats, which is your best form of fuel, you might say so. So fuel will go, or rather fats will go, you take, say, bacon, then you take your eggs. They don't have fat, but they have other super, egg is a superfood, contrary to what we've been told. I eat 4 to 5 eggs a day.
Me too.
Yeah, thank you. So what happens is that it goes like this, the fat go like this, and they go up to 3 hours. So you're actually satiated for longer. So imagine now I'm doing my intermittent fasting and I start my breakfast at 11 and it's full of fats. Sitaskia and jump at 5 o'clock, I still won't be feeling hungry because I've sustained for long, and I've also taken alongside some proteins, things like eggs. So all those, the body utilizes, and by the way, those ones don't spike. Even if you get a protein spike, it's very negligible. A person like who's predisposed to diabetes, it is not harsh. Fat, it's even excellent. So it goes like that. The problem.
Just clarify for me. So